lead me every day. I say I like it, oh. I like the way you they lead me, oh. Gina, do more, Gina, you are taking me higher. Gina, you never leave me no more, say.
Music for your spirit. For your spirit. Isaac's 98.1 FM, playing real music variety. Music variety.
Y todo va a estar bien. Everything will be alright. The whole world's in his hands. The whole world's in his hands. In the darkness, in the trials, he's faithful and he's true. Your whole world's in his hands. Y todo va a estar bien.
Your hits on your blessed best FM. Isaac 98.1 FM. 98.1 FM. Your number one family station.
Hey, this is Noel Professor Richards, inviting you to join me every Saturday night at 8 p.m. for Men Talk. We will talk about how to live, how to love, and how to lead. It's 1.5 hours of men talking about all the things that men talk about. So don't miss it. It's Men Talk every Saturday at 8 p.m. on Isaac The Promise Facebook page, FBN TV, and Isaac 98.1 FM, The Promise. What are the qualities that you look for in a partner? This has been the topic of discussion on Men Talk for the past 3 weeks. On Saturday, 12th March, we continue the conversation because we are not quite done. So join me, Noel Professor Richards, George Thomas, and our guest, Riquen Allen. It's Men Talk, Saturday, March 12th at 8 p.m. on Isaac The Promise Facebook page, FBN TV, and Isaac 98.1 FM, The Promise. Sponsored by Anaya Tony, the Feet Lady.
Hello.
Hey Jack, you missed the meeting yesterday, boy. What happened?
Andrea was under some pressure, boy. Well, you know, Uncle have diabetes, high blood pressure, and poor circulation. He couldn't even walk properly yesterday, so I took him to the Feet Lady, boy, Dr. Anaya Tony. And let me tell you something, when they're done with him, he feels so good. You know the man forget he walking stick by them. When I go back for the next session, we'll get back, man.
I must send her number to my cousin. She have a pinched nerve, lupus. And I think she uncle got stroke, you know. I had to see about my back pain too.
Well, Andrea, what are you waiting for? Take these numbers down one time. 360-5166 and 478-7416. Dr. Anaya Tony, boy, the Feet Lady from Anaya Health and Wellness Center. You can't go wrong.
5 minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock, good evening to you, Trinidad and Tobago, and of course the rest of the world. They're listening to us via the World Wide Web or Facebook or YouTube. Welcome to Men Talk. For those of you who are new, perhaps, and new to the station, or maybe new to the program, Men Talk really is a program set aside for men where we deal with men's issues, or we deal with issues from a male perspective. It's a program to encourage men to talk because we understand that talking helps. Talking empties you of all that you are, all that you know, in order for you to be filled again with what is right. And so we meet here every Saturday night from 8 to 9:30 p.m., 1.5 hours where we encourage the men to talk. But it's not a program for men only, it's a program for everyone, men and women, children, everyone, the entire family. It's just that in terms of talking, we only allow the men to talk because we want to hear from the men. We want to hear what the men have to say. What are your thoughts, your concerns, everything that men need to know. We need to know from the men. We want men to talk about it. And that's why the program is called Men Talk. My name is Noel Richards, aka the Professor. I'm your host for Men Talk, and together with, well, before I introduce my co-host, I have to call him that now, and our guest, for those of you who are new, especially if you're a female, because the program is Men Talk and we want to encourage men to talk, we ask, it's an interactive program where the listeners get an opportunity to call in and ask questions and make a comment. We ask ladies that you refrain from calling. We want to encourage the men to talk. And if the ladies start to call in and talk, the men will not. We know that for a fact because that has been proven. So we ask the ladies, if you have a question or comment, you do one of two things. One, you had to encourage a male around you, your husband, your boyfriend, your son, your father, uncle, brother, whoever it is, a friend, co-worker. Encourage them to call in and ask the question for you, or you can interact with us by sending a text message. Listen to me, not a voice note, a WhatsApp text message, and I'll give you the number straight away. It's 275-1981. 275-1981. That's a number, ladies, that you can connect with us. Please do not leave a voice note. Please leave a text message. Okay, and so you can ask a question anytime during the program. You can send a message to us, ask a question, make a comment, to clarify something, and because a lot of times women say things, and we need to hear from a female perspective sometimes. As I was coming in this evening, Madonna was talking about. She was talking about, the women are not invited to Men Talk. Well, the reason for that is because you want the men to talk. But as I was saying to her, maybe we should have a little collab sometime. Maybe we should have a men-women talk or women-men talk, anyhow you want to take it. And I think we would do that soon. So I'll have a talk with Madonna J, and we'll organize to have a collaboration of men and women coming together, because there are some things we need to clarify and we need to do it face to face. But ladies, in the meantime, we ask you to send in a WhatsApp text message to that number, 275-1981, and that is where you can connect with us tonight and any other night except when we have that special program. So let me introduce you, first of all, George Thomas. George has been, with me for many years now, and I think it's time that he gets upgraded. So last week, I think it was, he was officially, I officially upgraded him to co-host. And so my co-host, Huey Coffey, is not here. He has not been here for a little while, and Huey will connect with us again. But George is my co-host. He's hosting the program with me. He's not a guest. He's been here too long to remain at the status of guest. So, George, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Professor. Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. Blessed welcome to Men Talk on a Saturday on 98.1 FM, broadcasting loud. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Good to have you, George. And our guest, well, just now he might become a co-host because he's been here for the last few weeks sharing with us. And, I really love this gentleman because he has such wonderful insights. Especially into the topic that we've been discussing, and even the one prior to this. And, he has given us some real nuggets, some things to think about. And I really appreciate, what he has contributed to the program so far. Let's reintroduce our guest, our returning guest, Mr. Riquen Allen. Riquen, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Professor. Thank you for having me. Good evening from that and Tobago and the weather.
Good to see you, man. Well, I'm looking at you folks. Just remember, you can join us on FBN TV. That's our YouTube channel. And Isaac the Promise Facebook page. And as I look at Riquen on the monitor, I'm seeing that we're wearing the same colors tonight, Riquen. I don't know if you can see me, but we're wearing the same colors. I don't know what color George is wearing because I can't see George. But I think, Riquen, I say that, but I look on one monitor, I see the same color, and then I look on another monitor, I'm seeing a different color. So I'm not too sure if let me take that back. I'm not too sure if we're the same colors or not. But the important thing is that you're here tonight, and I welcome you back to Men Talk right here on Isaac 90.1 FM, FBN TV, and Isaac the Promise Facebook page. So I'm looking at 3 monitors. I think I've seen 3 different colors. So let me just leave that. Let me just leave the colors thing out of it right now. Riquen, I want you to take us back a bit. We have been talking about things men look for or men should look for in a partner. And this topic is so very important because a lot of men get into relationships perhaps not even, I'm not thinking about this. They get into relationship because of the emotion that they feel, the feelings at the time, and they don't take time to really sit down and put together maybe something structured as to what do I want in a partner? What am I looking for? What are the qualities that I need? Because scripture talks about God making a help that was suitable for Adam, and a lot of times we don't know what is suitable for us. We don't even know what we are suitable for, and so it's important for us to discuss this so that we can guide some people as to, and we're talking about those who are not yet married, we can guide them as to what they should look for in a partner. And we are also, as we ended last week, we also want to encourage those who have already been married. What are some of the things that we can do, perhaps to change ourselves, what we can do to enhance our relationships, that sort of thing. So I want you to just take us back a bit, if you will, just to remind us what we have been talking about, and maybe to enlighten some people who may be on for the first time in a couple of weeks or the first time ever. We want to just kind of share with them where we are and bring them up to speed. So, Riquen, over to you.
Excuse me, Professor. Thank you again. And so we're looking at qualities and attributes in a female that would make for a long-lasting relationship. We're looking at someone, or we're looking for someone with whom we can partner for the long term. All right, this is not short term, and according to scripture, it's still, well, at least the vows that we speak till death do us part. And so there's a lot that happens or can happen within that time frame. So from the time that we say I do to the time that we are done and we are dead, there's a whole lot of time in between there. Different seasons in our lives, different highs, different lows, challenges, etc., etc., etc. So you need to be looking for some stuff in a partner that could weather those challenges, weather the storms of life, the vicissitudes of life. And so one of the things we identified is the whole issue of suitability as a helper. So we're looking for someone, we're looking for a woman who is a helper at heart. And we were able to go back to the book of Genesis and identify that the way God referred to the female was as helper. He said, I will make a help suitable for the man, right? So in terms of qualities and attributes that we are looking for, the focus is not just on a helper, but on a suitable help, one who suits you, one who suits me. And so we established very clearly that it is important for us as men to know ourselves, um, to have a good relationship with ourselves, to understand um, our strengths, our weaknesses. Last week we made reference to the SWOT analysis, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it is something that businesses do as part of their strategic planning process. And there's nothing preventing an individual from conducting such an assessment, a personal assessment. Um, and so having a clear idea of your individual strengths and weaknesses, which are internal, and then opportunities and threats, which are external, they give you a pretty good idea of yourself. And once you understand yourself, you are now in a position to look for someone who is compatible with you or complementary, someone who can help you be and become the person that you were created to be and fulfill whatever God's purpose for your life is. And so we introduced the concept of due diligence. And from a business point of view, due diligence has to do with research and analysis of a company or organization that is done in preparation for a business transaction, such as a merger, purchase of securities, investments, etc., etc. So we're making the point that as men, it is important that we do due diligence. And due diligence is a process that is devoid of emotionalism. In other words, we are looking for hard facts. We're not operating based on mere emotions. We're not operating based on the fact that, you know, the lady or the woman, the one who has caught our eye, she looks good, she fine, etc. And so, you know, we become, our decisions are moved at an emotional level. When we're doing due diligence, we're looking at the facts. We're looking at, in the case of the woman, what are her habits? How does she treat with those close to her? How does she conduct herself? How does she handle situations and circumstances that probably not going her way? How does she handle adversity? You know, and all these are important and take time. So it's not something that we must rush, and it's therefore a very important exercise. And I say an exercise, but it's not meant to be rigid and that sort of stuff. It's a process that takes time, and in God's mind, marriage, as Hebrews 13:4 says, marriage is honorable in all. And marriage is the very first institution that God created. And because it is God's idea, and because God has set marriage up as a vehicle through which his purposes are accomplished, it means that we as members of the institution or as partners, we must have a high view of marriage, a high view of ourselves, a high view of our partner and the opposite sex on the whole, and especially a high view of marriage. I know I've said a lot. I don't know if I should.
No, well, that's great. I mean, you really captured it all to bring us to the point that we are at today. But before we move on, last week we had a little, what's the word, boy? I don't know what the word is. I can't quite find it, but just to describe it, we told George, we gave him a week's notice. We told George, because George made a statement last week that made me raise my eyebrows a little bit. And We told him that we would give him opportunity to qualify what he said last week, because he was talking about dating, I believe it was, and I don't think George was in favor of dating. And so I wanted to find out what his thoughts were. We don't want to just dismiss George just like that. Just disagree with him. We need to know what his thoughts, what is his heart on the matter. So George, I want to bring you in here. First of all, I want you, for those who missed it, to restate what you stated last week, and then to explain it. Because I don't know if I fully agreed with you based on what I understood what you were saying. And this program is not always about everybody agreeing with one another. Sometimes, some little opposition and that kind of thing makes for a healthy program. So George, I want to bring you in here before Riquen continues. I want to bring you in to make the statement that you made last week and to qualify. Okay. George, it's yours. Talk to me.
Fair enough, Professor. The point that I was making last week involved the fact that the concept of dating among Christians, it tends to mislead Christians when they are gearing themselves towards the ideology of marriage. And the reason why I stepped forward and I spoke to dating in a negative light is because of the fact that dating, the concept of dating, varies for a number of people, and it differs from perception to perception. You see, there are a number of people that would adhere to the traditional concept of dating, within which they would believe in the candlelight dinner and going out to a movie or having various areas that they go out to and that sort of thing. And within that forum, what you find happening is that inevitably both parties bring the best aspect of themselves to the table. So you get to see the best part of the person during dating, but you don't get to see the entire person during dating. And that one tends to be a bit misleading when you are looking into an honest assessment of what you are viewing as a partner or what you are looking for as a partner. Two, there's a very negative habit that I have observed developing with dating in 2022, dating within the 21st century. A habit of it adhering to our impulse to instantly have what we want. And if we don't get what we want, rather than work at it to achieve what we want, we switch the scenario entirely. So if your dating partner does not have the ideologies and ideals that you would like to have, rather than work on it or discuss it or have some form of dialogue to peer into the possibility of whether or not it can be achieved, you switch your date. You switch the individual that you're interested in. Some people even go forward as to having 2, 3, and 4 people dating them at once. And that, my dear professor, is in clear contradiction to what the institution of marriage is. Because the main philosophy that I see in marriage is finding a way to work through not just the good times, but the bad times. And habits, as my brother Riquen alluded to last week, habits have a knack for preceding intentions. You may have the best intentions for your marriage. However, if you have adopted in your life poor habits, those habits will eventually take precedence over any intention that you may have had. And if within your relationship life you have a habit of moving from one to the next to the next to the next, the moment things do not go right, it is going to be phenomenally difficult when you make the commitment, when you do say I do, to adhere to for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. It is not that I was saying that you would not get to know the person and that you would not take time to understand who you're with. That is not what I was referring to when I was speaking negatively about dating. It is, of course, expected and supported that you would have a partner and you would get to know that partner in different scenarios. You get to know that partner as he socializes with you, as he socializes with friends, as he socializes in the church, as he socializes among his family. It is important, it is critical for partners to get to know one another on those planes so that they would understand whether or not they're evenly yoked. However, dating has taken on quite a different meaning. What I'm talking about there, getting to know that person, is now correctly called courtship. And there is a very clear difference between courtship and dating. Because there are a number of our young people who find themselves dating without any clear interest or intention of it progressing towards marriage. They look at it as just having fun. And that, I see, is a dangerous precedent.
I hear you, George.
That we set in our lives that tend to lead us to a place where it becomes difficult to commit to a marriage later on in life.
Thank you for your explanation, George.
And this is the stance that I took last week.
Thank you for your explanation, George. I think you perhaps should have started with your last statement. And that would have clarified a lot when you talked about there's a difference between courting and dating. All right? I think if you had made that statement up front, then it would have been a little clearer, at least in my mind, what you were talking about. Because
the defense now rests.
Rests. Okay, we'll send the jury out in a minute to deliberate. But because when you talked about negatively about dating, George, my concern was how does a couple get to know each other? How do you come to the place where you decide whether or not this is the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with, if you do not interact with them socially and in different environments, etc., etc. And so when you spoke about negatively about dating, I am thinking that you're saying, well, look, they shouldn't interact at all, they shouldn't go anywhere, they shouldn't do anything. And in my mind, I was wondering, I was wondering, how in the world?
Creature by nature.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, it is how we function, it is how we interact with one another, be it in a relationship status, be it in our daily existence. Socialization is what we are about, and it's who we are. So, socialization within the right forum is essential and critical. However, society has now taken the concept of dating to a level that is dangerous and very, very toxic.
Well, and again, George, may I submit to the jury that when who are you, the defense or the prosecution? I don't know, I guess the defense. When the defense is making a statement, he should upfront state, make certain clarifications. Because, George, you didn't. You just said you were against dating. Now I understand where you're coming from when you make the point.
To the defense's defense, I was not given an opportunity to clear it. It was put on reserve for this.
All right. Okay, George. Okay. So you've made the defense. So I now understand what you're talking about. All right. So we will proceed. Let's throw it out. Let the judge throw it out. So you're free to go. Okay. All right, so
No contest. Yes.
so let's get back. All right, so the point that you're making is that there's a difference between dating and courtship. And courtship is the one that enhances all those things that you're talking about, getting to know the person in different environment. You know, it means because when people get together, especially if they're getting married, it's not just two people. It's a whole family, all the relatives, the village, everybody, all the experiences that come together. You know, there's a clash, and you're forming a new family. And you bring different ideals and different thoughts. That's why it's so important to have that. I know Riquen made the point that, you know, our whole life we're preparing for marriage, and I agree. But there must come a point where you sit before someone who is qualified, and they would guide you through the process in terms of, you know, some of the things that you need to look for, some of the things you need to look out for. How do you deal with finances? How do you deal with sex in marriage? How do you deal with different topics? You need somebody to guide you through that process and to bring the two ideals together, the two experiences, the two families together. You need that sort of thing. All right, so that the point that you're making, that courtship is important. It's more formal than dating, and you made the point. I get the impression you made the point that dating could be, you know, one person dating several people and that sort of thing. So I hear you when you say that. It's just that wasn't clarified last week. So as we said, let's move on. Thank you, George, for sharing. Thank you so much. Let's get back to Riquen, our guest. Riquen, let's take it from where we left off and move forward. Folks, if you just join us, this is Men Talk on Isaac 98.1 FM, The Promise, Isaac The Promise Facebook page, and FBN TV. Our guest is Riquen Allen. George Thomas is with us. My name is Noel Richards, a.k.a. The Professor. And the topic is the same as it has been for the past 2 weeks. We're looking for the qualities that we look for in a partner. As a man, what do I look for in a woman, you know, who I would want to spend the rest of my life with, or who I want to spend the rest of their life with me? What are the qualities and attributes? So Riquen, let's move forward.
Certainly. And as I continue to look into this subject matter, I recognize that there's still some foundational stuff that needs to be dealt with. That's very, very, very important. Now, last week we said, and it was reiterated earlier, that the woman whom one intends to pursue or to select as a potential partner for marriage should have a healthy view and sense of self-worth and self-esteem. Not someone who, you know, is almost needy, you know, in terms of validation and that sort of stuff. Someone who has a healthy view of men and marriage. Now, it's interesting that when we read the book of Ephesians chapter 5, and, you know, the Apostle Paul addresses husbands and wives and how we ought to relate one to another. Coming down to the end, almost to the end, he makes the point or the statement.
Okay, I'm not sure what's happening there. We seem to have lost Riquen for we seem to have lost Riquen. Riquen, if you're listening. George, are you there?
Technical difficulty. Okay.
Technical difficulty. Okay, I think he's back. Riquen, go ahead.
Hi.
Okay, we lost you there for we lost you there for a moment, but let's continue.
Okay, so I was just making the point that in Ephesians chapter 5, down to the end, Paul says, the Apostle Paul, that he was alluding to the union between Christ and the church, and marriage was used as representative of that union. All right. Now, all of us, especially those of us who are children of God, who are believers in Christ Jesus, we must understand very clearly that the minute we decide that we want to get married, it is not just about the two of us. This union that we seeking to establish is actually going to be a model or a, should I use the word prototype, or an example, a natural example of the union between Christ and his church. In other words, every marital union that is between two believers is a reflection and a representation of the union between Christ and his church. So when we decide to step into that arena, the man must understand that he is actually representing Christ, and the woman understands that she is actually representing the church. So this understanding should actually permeate and pervade all our dealings with each other. And I believe this is something that many of us have missed, especially when, we start to get on each other's nerves and we start to, to irritate each other and get vexed and that sort of stuff. Because at the end of the day, the question that the man should be asking himself is, am I conducting myself as Christ would conduct himself? And the question the woman should be asking, am I conducting myself as the church should be conducting herself? And I think that is very important for us to understand and to grasp. Am I being heard?
Yes, you're being heard. You're being heard. Now, that's some big responsibilities, or a big responsibility there, Riquen. For someone to think that way, because usually when you start annoying one another, when you get vexed, when a man gets vexed with his wife get vexed with him, all they're thinking about is why they vex, what she did to me that annoy me and irritate me and get me so mad that, I want to say this and I want to do that, and vice versa. And so what is in front of them is what they see. Whatever the experience is what they see. What you're asking is for them to go beyond that and ask themselves that question. Now, that's a big challenge. I'm telling you, that's a big challenge. People will tell you that, because if my wife does something, I'm just talking as a man in general now. If my wife does something, let's say, I come home and I'm trying to find an example. I don't get vexed much, so I'm trying to find an example that, let me put it the other way around. One of the things, one of my shortcomings, and I've admitted it on air already, and I'll admit it, is that I don't notice things as well as I should. Changes. So my wife might change around the house, and I reach home and I didn't really notice, and that's one thing that gets her upset. You didn't even notice. For some women, they change their hair, they change the hair salon and the man, and they get upset for that. One of the things my wife gets upset for, I could tell you, is cleanliness. She's dealing with 3 boys, four males. All right, because it's our 3 boys, it's her and me. And we are not as neat and clean as we ought to be as males. And she's the only female, and my wife is a stickler for order and cleanliness. So she gets annoyed a lot of times when as far as I'm concerned, because sometimes my boys and your mother tell them to clean up the place, and they clean up and say, "Daddy, you're looking good now." And I would say, "Yes." And then she would come and, "Why is this place still dirty?" All right, and it's because she sees it differently, and she gets annoyed. Now, when she gets annoyed with us, I don't think what goes through her mind is this the way the church should be, with Christ? I don't think we think that. We think about this situation. So my question is, are we saying now we need to change our mindsets? Are we supposed to say, well, listen, every time I get angry now, I am supposed to stop myself and reflect on this thing about whether this is the way Christ would treat his church or the bride, and this is the way the bride should reflect. Is that what you're saying, Riquen? That's what, because that is a big step. That's a big thing. I'm telling you, for any couple, that's a big challenge for couples. All right, so that's what I'm asking.
No.
Are you saying we need to reprogram our mind to think that way? That's my question to you. And I hear George in the background somewhere. I hear George in the background
Let me
somewhere.
chime in a little bit here,
Yes,
Professor,
George.
because actually I learned from you, Professor, a very successful way to get around that disparity that you're explaining there between emotion and that higher consciousness that would lead you to think and behave in that manner. And what you shared with me sometime in our Bible studies together is that you have something of a protocol or fail-safe should we get angry with one another. You have certain rules of engagement, so to speak, in having a disagreement, in having that type of interaction. For example, at the end of the day, one of the best rules that I've ever heard is that you do not argue in front of the kids, in front of the children. That helps to keep the family structure together. Another such rule of engagement is taking time out between one another before discussing the thing that would have upset the husband and the wife. For example, money seems to be a point of contention between couples. A husband might be saving money for something, and the wife sees something else that needs to be done in the home, and she chooses to go and utilize that money, and then there's disparity between the two. In taking time out before engaging the argument, which, yes, I know at the end of the day it takes a lot of practice, it takes a lot of discipline to put these rules of engagement into action when emotions run high. However, once they're successfully put in place, it allows for that opportunity for you to get into a higher level of thinking beyond the emotion before you address and engage the problem. And in doing so, I personally believe that it would save a number of marriages, it would save a number of situations from escalating out of control, and yes, it would definitely guide the order within which your marriage and your family progresses. Should you sit down under a calm, cool head and say, you know what, we have got to put in these prerequisites for should we get angry with one another or should we get into a disagreement with one another. We take time out. If one person walks away, you don't pursue that person. You allow that person to walk away under the condition that that person is going to come back and deal with the circumstance. It gives each person time to think and reflect. And in that thinking and reflection, you need to involve God somewhere in there. You need to involve the church. You need to involve Christ somewhere in your reflection before readdressing the situation, so that you would be able to better address the situation without allowing unchecked emotions to destroy your marriage by you saying and doing things that you would not have normally said or done. So I don't know if you wish to add to that, Brother Riquen, but as far as I go, that is where I see that those rules of engagement assisting in us getting to that level of thinking, am I functioning in a manner in which Christ would have functioned? Am I functioning in a manner in which the church is supposed to function and respond? So I pass it over to you, Brother Riquen.
Thank you, George. Go ahead, Riquen.
Appreciate your insight. So, here's what I'm saying. I'm saying before we get into marriage, we must understand that our marriage must reflect the union of Christ and His church. It is not just about what type of marriage we want as individuals, but it is about how are we going to bring our uniqueness to the institution of marriage and at the same time reflect the union between Christ and His church. Every marriage is supposed to reflect that union. And so we must enter into marriage with that mindset. So to answer your question, Professor, I'm saying yes, before we get married, the man and the woman must have that mindset that, hey, listen, I'm entering into an institution that is so sacred and so important. God has chosen to use that to represent the union between Christ and His church. And even as I think about it, I rather suspect that many of us have started off, I don't want to say on the wrong foot, but we've started off with a lower level, a lower view of marriage than we should have. Now let me go a little further. In Isaiah 1:18, God invites the children of Israel, who at the point in time were sinful and idolatrous and given trouble. In Trini parlance, right? Trini parlance, straight talk, plain talk, good manners, they were horning God. They were being unfaithful. Trini talk. And God says, come, let us do what? Reason together. So God, who is the right one, throws out an invitation to His bride, Israel, who is the wrong one. And He said, listen, even though I know you're wrong, in fact, you're so wrong that you sin like crimson and blood red. But I am extending to you an opportunity for us to come to a common place of reasoning, that we could sit and think things through, we could talk things through, and we could come to a place where it's like, here what, I want to make your red crimson become like wool. I want your blood to be like snow. I probably mix them up a little bit, but we understand where I'm coming from. So, what am I saying? That is an example of how God deals with His bride. And so it is a pattern that we can use, that even when there is conflict, and it now goes back to what George was talking about in terms of what I would call the rules of engagement. So before we get into marriage, that should be established as well, the rules of engagement. So how are we going to deal with conflict? How are we going to deal with disagreement, etc., 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 etc.? And we must understand that marriage is like a game. So I'm making an analogy here. Marriage is like a game. It is not a game, it's serious business, but it is like a game. And in a game, you have players. In order to play the game at the highest level, we must know the rules. Correct?
Correct.
Beautiful. We must know the rules in order to play the game at the highest level. That is one. Number two, no player is bigger than the game.
Amen.
I think I need to say that again. No player is bigger than the game. Players operate within the parameters of the rules. And as long as they do that, then all will go well. Now, sometimes it doesn't always go that way. Sometimes players will commit fouls against each other. That is why we have referees and umpires. There's a third party. Now, there are some people who believe don't get no third parties involved in your marriage. That, to me, is foolish advice. Because sometimes we come across thorny issues that require an expert, that requires someone who is trained in the understanding and interpretation and application of the rules, someone who is not partial to either team. And so that is where counselors would come in. That is where probably our pastors and our spiritual leaders would come in, but a quote-unquote referee when there may be fouls committed against each other. And what I have found is that a lot of us, when we get upset with each other,
okay, I think we've lost Riquen again.
to go against the rules of marriage that, or the rules of engagement that we have set up. You all hear me clearly?
Yes, we're hearing you clearly. Go ahead.
And so I am challenging us to change our mindset and our mentality, because when we decide to take a wife or to take a husband and we enter the arena of marriage, marriage as an institution is bigger than either of us. And so when we step into that institution, we must be prepared to abide by the rules which ultimately have been created by God. But then there are details that we work out between ourselves as individuals, which George would have been alluding to earlier. Am I making sense?
Yes,
you're making. You understand
it? We're hearing you.
Perfect sense. Perfect sense, brother.
Folks, let me just say it's 8:53. You're listening to Men Talk on Isaac 98.1 FM, The Promise, Isaac The Promise Facebook page and FBN TV. That's our YouTube channel, so you can look at us as well as see us. Riquen Allen, his voice, that's the voice you've been hearing, our guest for today, and of course George Thomas and myself, Noel Professor Richards. And Riquen, let me just endorse what you've just said. I think it was a couple of weeks ago when we started, one of the analogies that I gave was that sometimes two people get into marriage, and we gave the analogy of sports, and you'd find that I don't remember if I used this particular example, but it was something like this, where one comes out with bat and pads and the other one come out in football tugs, and you realize that it's really two different games they're playing with two different sets of rules. And a lot of us get into marriage like that, not understanding what game that they're playing, and each game has different rules. So you and your spouse cannot be playing two different games, or have the idea that, you're playing two different games, you're calling it the same thing, you're thinking, okay, we're playing sports, but you didn't realize that it's two different sports. And that is the problem with a lot of people. They get into marriage not understanding, not with a common understanding of what marriage is. And what you said there about being committed to the game, being committed to marriage, you have to know what you're committed to. And that's why it is important. It is important, George, that courtship period too, for us to talk about what are the rules of the game, and we talk about rules of engagement, and that's something I talk a lot about. That's why George was talking about it. My wife and I, at home, my home has rules of engagement. Our marriage has rules of engagement, and it's important so that when you, because we are all different, no matter how much you love the person, because you are different, you see things differently, your perspective on things sometimes might be different. How you deal with that is important. You need to put things in place for that. And so that's another, a whole other program about rules of engagement. We could talk about that separately. But I agree with you, Riquen, that it's important for us to understand what marriage is. Too many of us go into it with frivolous ideas of what it is. You know, I see a girl, I like her, she makes my heart go pitter patter. They still say that, boy? I know long time we used to say that when we were small. Pitter patter, pitter, yeah, some song, I can't remember the name of this song. But, you know, we go into it thinking that that's what it's about. I feel that way about her, she feels that way about me, so why not? Let's get together. Not understanding, as you said, there are rules of engagement. And even as we get into it, we need to understand there must be a common, especially if we're playing on the same team, you know, if it's football we're playing, you playing forward, I playing defense, and we need to pass the ball to one another. And you know, a number of things that will come up. How do you know who's tackling and who's defending? I mean, we're using sports analogy here, but it's important for us to understand what we're talking about is principles. There are principles that govern marriage that both couples must know and understand for there to be a successful marriage. And if we don't understand those principles that have been put in place by God himself, if we don't realize how important marriage is, so important, as Riquen says, that God chose marriage to represent that relationship that he has, that Christ has with his bride. That should tell you how important marriage is. That in itself should tell you how important this thing called marriage is. So what we're saying out there, folks, you're going to get married, you're thinking about getting married. It's not just about setting a date and you know, and putting things together and for the wedding. And it is so much more than that. And both of you, you and that young lady, and we're talking to the men in particular right now because this is men talk, you and that lady, I said young lady, but older people get married too, you and that lady need to be on the same page. You need to agree that this is what marriage is, and you need to be committed to the marriage because, you know, people change, things will change. But the rules of marriage don't change. If you're playing a football game, the rules don't change. Okay? Sometimes you may change position. The coach might have you playing, you know, midfield or back, or he might put you in the goal. That may change, but the rules don't change. And we need to understand that as couples, as males and as females, that marriage doesn't change. The rules that God put in place for marriage does not, or they do not change. And this is what we need to understand. Folks, it's 8:58. We want to open up the lines. Even as we continue the conversation, as we continue chatting, we want to open up the lines to take your calls. And as I do that, I want to remind us that this is not just for people who are going to be married. This is also for people who are married. We can, even though we may have had the wrong concept and the wrong idea, or we got into it, you know, for the wrong reason, we can bring it back to where it is supposed to be. It's not too late, so I want you to know that. So we're going to open up the lines at this time, 480-4121, 480-4121, 463-7208, 463-7208. Those are the numbers to call. Remember, we take calls from males only. Only men can call, men, boys, as long as you're male. If you are female and you want to contribute to the program, the number to send us a text message, a WhatsApp message, is 275-1981. 275-1981. As I say that, let me just read one of the text messages sent in. It says, "Good night, Professor. Sometimes there is courtship and you can be misled by the Christian gentleman that's portrayed until after marriage. Even the counseling was based on sex by a pastor, of course. The woman was told, give the man his thing when he wanted. So therefore their marriage was about that, and they didn't last long." Okay, let me read this again because I'm reading it cold. "Professor, sometimes there is courtship and you can be misled by the Christian gentleman that's portrayed until after marriage. Even the counseling was based on sex by a pastor, of course. by a pastor. Of course, the woman was told, get a man he thing when he wanted. So therefore, the marriage was about that, and it didn't last long. I guess she's talking about a particular case, a particular instance. And let me just say that even as we respond to this, I want to say something here, and I know some people may not agree. Not every pastor leader is qualified to give marriage counseling. I do not believe, this is my personal opinion, not because you're a pastor, it means that you can counsel people in marriage. There are people who, even in the congregation, some of the elders who may be trained, who may be qualified, who may be gifted in giving, wise counsel to people. Not because you're a pastor, and I have seen this already in many different instances. Not because you're a pastor. If you know, and as a leader, if you know that there are others within the congregation, those who are there to help you, part of the ministry, who can give counsel to people, I want to ask you and suggest that you direct people to them. It's not going to take away from you. It doesn't make you less of a pastor. It doesn't make you not the pastor. Okay, so it doesn't come, being the leader doesn't mean that you have to be able to do everything. Being the leader means that you ensure that it gets done, whatever it is. But it doesn't mean that all of us are qualified to give that counsel. And as you see in a case like this that this person is talking about, I don't know how you gentlemen feel about that, but that is my
I would like to. If it's possible, Professor, I would like to speak to one aspect of what was said. You see, and this is exactly what I was trying to describe. Many people don't understand what courtship is. Courtship is you getting to know this person on different levels. Courtship can involve you going with this person to a funeral, seeing how they deal with grief. Courtship involves you going to church with this person. It goes way beyond the eros love. It goes way beyond the attraction. Courtship goes into who this person is. And while I would admit there are some people that can hold a mask for their life, they are very few and far between. There would obviously be, in certain circumstances, red flags that would pop up should this person be wearing a mask and attempting to fool you. Once you see how they interact with their parents, how they interact with their peers, their college mates, the people that they go to work with on a daily basis, once you get an opportunity to see them in life, it becomes increasingly difficult for them to put forward before you a mask that would give you a misconception of who this person is. And this is why courtship is important. It transcends just going and sitting and having dinner with this person, or going to a movie with this person, or going out anywhere. Courtship can involve you sitting down home with this person, seeing the person cook a meal, and at the end of the day, these things would help you to see the real and true person. All right? And when you are engaging in courtship, sometimes you have to put the emotions aside and objectively analyze the actions of this person to see whether or not this is something that you can work with, or whether or not this is something that is not compatible to you. So I in hearing this comment, what I'm seeing and hearing by this comment is that this person would have engaged with this person only on certain levels of courtship. And so a lot was left out. And of course, yes, by having the wrong guide, you can obviously be misled into a mistake of a marriage.
Yeah.
So So performance beats back old talk. That's one of the things that I wanted to allude to. Getting someone that you both agree on would be a neutral party that is fit to counsel you is something that is critical and fundamental just as well in your relationship before marriage as well as following the marriage. So that's my humble contribution to that.
Thank you, George. Thank you, George. Folks, before we continue, just to remind you that you're listening to Men Talk on Isaac 98.1 FM, The Promise, FBN TV, that's our YouTube channel, and Isaac The Promise Facebook page. We want to say thank you so much to our sponsor, Anaya Tony, and the feet lady who does reflexology. She's a sponsor for this program, Men Talk. We are taking your calls at this time, 480-4121. 480-4121 and 463-7208. Those are the numbers to call if you have a question or have a comment. We have a call on the line. Let's take the call. Hello, good evening. You're on the air.
Yes, hello, good night.
Hello, good evening. Go ahead.
Yes, as I was listening to the program, was first time caller.
Welcome.
Well, I find relationship these days, more or less, the ladies, for me, I find it kind of more selfish in the sense that if you and a young lady is having a relationship and their finance and things is concerned, I find most of the time them don't really come up to the level where you will be putting out, and they're saying these days that the relationship is supposed to be equal and we're sharing the relationship and sharing the responsibility. You putting out, and most of them will have plenty of them to say that their money is their own and your money is their own. And I do find that is how it's supposed to be if we're saying that we be in this thing together and we're sharing a partnership together.
Okay, thank you. So, are you asking a question or are you making a statement? I just want to clarify that.
Well, I'm making a statement.
You're making a statement.
That's my observation, from
dealing with finances. That's what you're talking about. Dealing with the finances.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. More or less, I find that the where that is concerned, I find it about kind of selfishness where that is concerned. And then the next thing too, most of the time, where between the men and the women, people will always tell you, well, here, a man responsibility is supposed to provide and all them kind of thing, but nobody tells the ladies what is her responsibility where in the relationship. I find things going in a kind of one-sided way. I find, counseling and everything, the laws of the land, plenty things suit up in it make up in such a way where the women benefit and the men just putting out.
Thank you very much.
That's my take. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so gentlemen, you've heard the gentleman. He spoke about two different things. I don't know if anybody... Well, before you respond, we have another call. So let's take the calls. Let's give the calls priority first. All right. Hello, good evening. You're on the air.
Yeah, Professor, I want to compliment you for that because I attend a mega church in South, senior pastor, because you know in Trinidad, even abroad, and he sent his couple to a senior couple in church for counseling. He don't do it at all.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I want to be curious.
Yeah,
I don't want to counsel, he sent it to that couple.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. And it's good that, you're able to do that as a leader. You need to borrow all the brains that you can get and all the abilities and talent that you can get. So, gentlemen, yes, let's head back to the call just now. He talked about finances, and he talked about the responsibility of women, women not knowing what their responsibilities are. I don't know if you'll agree with him or disagree Anyone wants to care to comment on the gentleman's statement?
Take the courage of the morning.
Well, I'm just
no comment?
Brother Riquen. Yes.
Yes.
I'll let you take that one, brother.
Permit me to go back to the previous caller. And let me make the statement. Not every marriage between two Christians is a Christian marriage.
You could get in trouble for that, Riquen. Say it again, though.
That's all right.
Say it again.
Not every marriage between two Christians is a Christian marriage. What makes the marriage Christian is the fact that it is guided by Christian principles. And we were making that point earlier. So we have, unfortunately, lots of marriages between Christians who behave in a very un-Christian-like manner, who act very selfishly, who act as if, well, we bigger than the institution of marriage, who get all up in their feelings when they're upset and so on, and, behave in a manner that is unbecoming of the rules that are laid out in the scripture. And this is an area where many of us, and I'm including myself, many of us have to repent because we have done it our way. Because we have done this thing in the flesh. Let me draw something else to our attention. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22, I think it is, where it says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it, and then wives, submit yourself to your husbands. 2 or 3 verses before that, the Apostle Paul says, be not drunk with wine, wherein is excess, but be filled with the Spirit. It is not coincidental that the injunction or the command to be filled with the Spirit comes before the Apostle Paul tells couples how they should act one towards another. Why? Because in order for the man to really love his wife as Christ loved the church, he needs to be filled with the Spirit. And in order for the wife to submit herself as the church submits to Christ, she needs to be filled with the Spirit. And what I found is we have not brought that understanding, that conversation. We talk about the anointing for everything. What about the anointing to love our wives? What about the anointing for wives to submit to their husbands? What about the grace to operate at that level? And the reality is that because the demands, because we are representing Christ and his church, we need the fullness of the Spirit of God to be able to function at that level. And many of us have not tapped into that dimension because we have seen marriage as a flesh thing. We've seen marriage as just, this between you and me, baby. And when we get upset with one another, oh my God, the amount of flesh that comes out. And in truth and fact, it displeases God because as brother to sister, there are ways that we should conduct ourselves. Remember that 2 Christian people in a marriage are still brother and sister. And there are rules of engagement between brother and sister. So if one offends the other, how do we deal with that? How do we treat with that? And many of us are guilty of not holding fast to those principles and those rules and those precepts. And so we misrepresent marriage. And what happens is that people looking in They're seeing our divorce rate so high. They're seeing husband and wife not really getting along. We put on a facade. You know, we come into church looking all nice and stuff, but when we go home or we in the community is a different story. And that is misrepresenting Christ and his church. And it is time for us who are office holders in the institution of marriage to return to that high and lofty place. And even though, Professor, you admitted that, you know, this thing hard, the reality is that as believers, we are called to a high calling and we are called to conduct ourselves differently. What about, or have we considered that our marriages could be tools of evangelism to win other people to Christ? When they look at how we are relating one to another, husbands to wives, when they see the quality of submission on the part of the wives, when they see the quality of love on the part of the husbands, it's like, nah boy, I want that. And it becomes a door opener. How can I get that? And we get the opportunity now to share with the unbeliever, to share with outsiders, hey, this is not because, you know, we have chemistry, you know, and we hit it off. No, this is because we have decided, in spite of each other's shortcomings and faults and flaws, we have decided to live according to a certain standard, and that standard is dictated to us in Scripture, and it is a reflection of Christ and his church. And I'm suggesting if we begin to operate, to think like that, and to operate like that, we would see transformation in our marriages, in our homes, and in the overall fabric of the society.
Couldn't agree with you more, dear Riquen. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Amen.
And it really is important the way we see marriage, what we see marriage as, understanding. And when I say what we see marriage as, it is not that everybody is supposed to have a different perspective. Marriage is one thing. The principles of God, you know, they don't change. So it is important for us to have the right perspective, the right understanding, the word, of what marriage is and what is supposed to come out of it. And not having the right understanding is the cause for a lot of issues and problems, even the one that the gentleman brought up in terms of finances, because there are ways to deal with finances in a marriage. And again, a lot of us go into marriage not understanding that these are some of the things that we need to talk about, we need to deal with. How are we going to deal with the finances? How are we going to deal with different issues? What are the rules? And you know, I don't want people to think that Christianity is a set of rules, because that's how I thought Christianity was when I was growing up. You know, there are a lot of do's and don'ts. You do this and you don't do that. And, you know, making it very rigid and even boring even. But what I'm saying is that we need to understand there are certain principles. And there are principles with regards to finance. And if we don't adhere to those principles, we're going to get ourselves in problems. And that's why even when I do marriage counseling, finance is one of the areas that we deal with. It's a critical issue because it's been the cause of a lot of breakups in marriages, for divorce even, because people cannot agree on how to handle finances, which is a very, very important part of marriage. Communication, how are we going to deal with that? What are we going to do about the children? There are many, many different issues that we need to deal with when it comes to marriage. But as Riquen was saying, the important thing is to understand what marriage is about, because too many of us go into it based on the wrong information, the wrong attitude, the wrong perspective, wrong perception of what it is. And that's why we run into all these problems that we have. And that's why the divorce rate is so high, because when we realize that, hey, this is not what I wanted, this is not what I wanted, you know, this is not what I thought I was going to get, we look for, you know, an escape clause, and we look to get out of it without really, if we understand what marriage is and we are committed to the marriage, because the principles don't change, we change, the principles don't change, then we will continue to be committed to it because it doesn't shift. The goalpost doesn't shift. All right, even though we might be not in the position that we went in to play, the important thing is that we know we have to go and score in that goalpost. So let's see what we can do to get the ball in the net. Okay, and I know we use another sporting analogy. I'm hoping that people who are not familiar with sports understand what we are saying. It's the principles of what we are saying. So it's 9:20. We only have about less than 10 minutes before we wrap up. If you have a question, please call us 480-4121, 480-4121. 463-7208. Those are the numbers to call. And of course, ladies, 275-1981. That's the number to text us. One lady says counsel and courtship is important before marriage because can butt heads if you don't agree on issues. That's one lady. Thank you so much. Someone said in regards to the gentleman and his financial concerns, I believe it's a conversation he has to have with his wife as the two contributes what financially. A lot of women come from homes where their fathers were the providers and they expect the same from their husbands. However, that may not be so practical in these times, so communication is important. And that is, I agree with that 100%. Conversation has to be had, and even as Riquen says, sometimes it's the two people themselves are not able to work out the issues. Sometimes you need an intervention of a third party who's qualified, the referee, the umpire, who know the rules and who understand the rules and can give guidance, and and not really committed to one party or the other like a mediator. We need that. Sometimes we need that sort of intervention from someone who can help. Let's take a call. A caller is on the. Try again, please. 463-7208 and 480-4121. Let me say something quickly again, though. Something you alluded to, George, earlier on, when we were talking about the rules of engagement. You said one of the things I said about not quarreling in front of the children. Well, that is not exactly so. Now, my wife and I don't quarrel. Yeah, we have disagreements. But there are times when you need to allow the children to see you and hear you disagree and how you handle disagreements. It's important for them to see that. So there are times when our children see us disagreeing about something, about an issue, and how we work it out. Because my boys need to know how to deal with those sorts of things. So depending on what it is, we allow them. We don't hide it from them that we disagree, on a particular matter. And, sometimes they see it, they hear us, they hear both sides, and they hear. But we always operate within the rules that we have set so that they know how to handle disagreements, how to handle challenges, how to handle, when if your wife disagrees with you, what do you do? Let's take a call. Hello, good evening. You're on the air.
Yeah, Professor, for me, believe what you say that what the guy said, marriage is more spiritual than physical. There is anything physical, don't last.
Say again, please.
For me, believe what the guy said, marriage is more spiritual than physical.
Mm-hmm.
Because anything physical don't last. Anything spiritual it will last.
Because he thinks physical doesn't last?
Marriage is more spiritual than physical. Because even anything physical don't last. But if it's spiritual, it will last.
Okay, so you're saying that's what he said?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to allow Riquen to respond to that. Riquen, did you hear what the gentleman said?
Yes, I heard what he said. I understand where he's coming from. Let us remember, Jesus said, what is that which is flesh, and that which is spirit is spirit. The point I was making is that because marriage is such a high calling, it cannot work if, as believers, we are operating in the flesh. If, as believers, we are operating selfishly. If, as believers, we are doing it our own way. Essentially, that's the point I'm making. The reality is that the physical will last as, the saying is still death do us part, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the whole point we're emphasizing is that our our governing power for the marriage is not how we feel. It's not our moods. It's not our emotions. It's not, well, you get me vexed, so you understand? And no, no. Once we operate that way, then our marriages are destined to fail sooner or later. So that's the point I'm making. And I totally agree with what you said just now, with respect to not hiding all your disagreements and so on, because our children could be misled to believe that we don't have any quarrel, any argument, any issues, and that's a fallacy. And so it's important for them to be able to see, okay, we have a disagreement here. This is how it is being handled. This is how it should be handled, and allow them to see the outcome of it.
Yes.
And at the end of it, there is a better understanding. Okay, I appreciate your perspective more. I see it more from your perspective, and vice versa. And we come to some sort of mutually favorable outcome.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, it's 9:26 and a half. We have to wrap up here. A lot has been said, and I know a lot more can be said. But I want to give Riquen, an opportunity to kind of summarize where we are at, what we have said over the past few weeks. I know this conversation can continue, but I want us to summarize here what we have said, and so that men would be empowered. We would understand where we are at and what we are supposed to do, what we're looking for, so that we can move forward. For those who are already married and those who are yet to be married, what are we looking at in terms of a partner? So Riquen, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to just wrap up. Someone is asking for your number as well, Riquen. I don't know if you want to give out your number or not. That's up to you. Someone is asking for your number. I will leave that up to you if you want to do that. So go right ahead.
Okay. Okay. So coming out of all of this, what I'm realizing is that it is vitally important that we understand the purpose of marriage. As men, that we understand our own purpose as individuals. We may not have all the details, but we must have a sense of why we are on the planet, and what God has put us here to accomplish, to do, because the woman that we choose as a partner is going to help us in the accomplishment of that purpose. Lastly, I would strongly advise and recommend that there are some characters, some biblical characters that we can study to glean some of the attributes that we have been talking about, and some of them we haven't spoken about. So very quickly, men and women, you can look at Sarah, you can look at Rebecca, you could look at Abigail, you could look at Ruth, which is a very nice example. Who else? Well, those four come immediately to mind. Everybody likes to talk about the Proverbs 51 woman, but I wouldn't put so much pressure on the ladies. But look at those four characters: Sarah, Rebecca, Abigail, Ruth, and see how much you could glean from their character as wives and potential wives. All right, and I'll leave it there for now. In terms of my contact, it's 706-4455. 706-4455.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, George. I want to allow you,
Yes, Trinidad and Tobago, if you would allow me for just a second, I would like to say a special thanks to my brother and friend Riquen Allen for his wisdom that he's imparted over these few weeks to us. Thank you, you man of God, for sharing, and I trust that many of us have gained valuable food to go forward in our lives, in our relationships, and I trust that we would continue to be blessed by your input in sessions to come. May God continue to richly bless you and keep you. Trinidad and Tobago, I love you. God bless and keep you. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much, George. And let me add my own thank you to Riquen for what he has contributed to us over the past few weeks. Thank you so much, Riquen. What you've shared is invaluable. And we are really honored to have had you on the program. And I suspect that you'll be here more here than there, on this program because, you're fitted in so well. So we will talk. But thank you so much. God richly bless you for all that you've shared. George, thank you, for being a great co-host. George, you're talking like you're a married boy. People wouldn't think that you're not married yet. George, you have some insights there, boy. I don't know where you got them from, but thank you so much, George. Folks, all of you. I know somebody sent in a voice note. We weren't able to play the voice note. I'm so sorry. I wish you had sent in a text message. Would have been able to read it, but it's kind of too late for that now. So I'm trusting that maybe if I listen to it, I'll be here with you till 12 midnight. So if it's something that I can even run after, I will do that. So thank you so much, our technical team and a team of one. Mr. Vince Lejar, for having us on Facebook, YouTube, live. And thank you, all of you, those of you who listened to the program, those who called in, those who texted in, and that's those who listened. A lot of people, we have a lot of listeners, I was going to say members, but listeners who listen to the program faithfully, both male and female. They say they don't miss Men Talk, and I thank you so much. I know not everybody's radio radio savvy, and not everybody likes to call in, but a lot of people say, look, we listen to the program faithfully. Thank you so much for your support and for your encouragement, and we will continue to do as long as God gives us, all that we need to do. All that we need to do it, we will continue doing it. So thank you. So we'll be back next week, God's willing, at 8 o'clock next week, Saturday, for Men Talk, for another edition of Men Talk. In the meantime, I am Noel Professor Richards. I'll be here with you, as I said, until midnight tonight. I'm sitting in for Adesola, but this is the end of Men Talk for today. So thank you so much to the Feet Lady and I, Tony, Reflexology. God bless you. This is the end of Men Talk for today.
It really doesn't matter where you've been. Son, let me tell you.
Hello. Hey, Jack. You missed the meeting yesterday, boy. What happened?
Andre, I was under some pressure, boy. Well, Uncle have diabetes, high blood pressure, and poor circulation. He couldn't even walk properly yesterday, so I took him to the Feet Lady, boy, Dr. Naya Tony. And let me tell you something. When they're done with him, he feels so good. The man forget he walking stick by them. When I go back for the next session, we'll get back, man.
I must send her number to my cousin. She have a pinched nerve, lupus. And I think she uncle got a stroke. I had to see about my back pain, too.
Well, Andre, what are you waiting for? Take these numbers down one time. 360-5166 and 478-7416. Dr. Anaya Tony, boy, the Feet Lady from Anaya Health and Wellness Center. You can't go wrong.
Music for your spirit. For your spirit. Isaac 98.1 FM, playing real music variety.